Hi gang! Today we are doing a dry brush tutorial and we're going to use this Gutrippa mini for the example. I've primed in black. I'm going to be doing his shield first, so I'm going to use Khorne Red, Wildrider Red. I ended up not using the yellow, I didn't like how it looked. I've started using one of these silicone fidget toys instead of a wet palette. I kind of prefer being able to control how wet the paint is rather than relying on the wet palette to osmosis the water. And for brushes, I'm using these Notts Hobbies dry brushes that I was sent. They're really good, they're goat's hair, they're very fluffy and they hold paint really well. And they're quite long, so the paint doesn't get all the way into the ferrule, which is really nice. I'll mainly be using this one. And then just for the little details, I'm just using my army painter. This will just be for little edges and teeth and things. Another thing Notts sent me as part of their dry brushing set is this wooden board. It's actually quite useful for getting paint off of the dry brush without having moisture taken away from, like, too much moisture, so it can still be used. So to start on the shield, we're going to start with a red stipple, just to coat the base but not completely cover up the black shadow. So I'm going to gently wipe off the paint onto the board until it kind of looks like this when I do dragging motions across. This is a good amount of paint just to leave some on the mini to give it some texture, but not so much that it floods everything. If you're having trouble with your paint being too shiny as well, this is quite a good method because the stippling motion creates like a not smooth surface, so the paint is less reflective. So now we're moving on to the Wildrider Red. We're just going to do a nice highlight with it. It's not too much of a difference to the Khorne. If you want to use a brighter orange or red, then go for it. So here I'm just going to gently swipe over the mini in the direction that I want the light to be, and just build up some of that Wildrider Red on the raised parts of the mini and the edges. When putting paint on your brush, it is important to make sure that before you start dry brushing, you do have a piece of towel, or like paper towel, or the wooden board, for example. Or sometimes I'll just use my hand just to see how much paint I have, so I'm not making like streak lines. I'm just sort of dusting with paint, essentially. Here you can see I did try with the Dawn Yellow. I did decide to undo it and leave it out. But you can see here that I did have too much paint on the brush and it is leaving those streaks as I'm brushing it on. It would be quite good for weathering, using a damper brush for things like corrosion due to like water on spaceships and things that fly through the air and pick up ice that damage the paint. But that's not what I was going for with this mini, so I undid it, redid the red, redid the Wildrider dye brush, and then carried on. So after I redid that, ignoring the yellow accident, I'm gonna do the teeth with my little brush. I'm just using Ushabti Bone to just go over the teeth, trying to be really careful with my brush just so I get those nice clean edges. I'm not going all the way down the edges of the teeth, I am just doing the tops just so that they look like they have a bit more depth. So after doing the teeth, I'm now gonna just bring out the eyes a little bit. I chose to give him little yellow eyes, I just thought it was a little bit cute. You can do them whatever color you want. You don't have to follow my scheme. You could do the shield blue or green. Traditionally the squigs are red. I'm then gonna go around with the Leadbelcher to just go with some of the nuts holding the skin onto the wooden board that is the shield. I'm never sure what these things on the chin are, so I just made them yellow, like little spots, and then I put little O-rings around them with the Leadbelcher. Now I'm just gonna get some of that Wildrider Red with my little brush, and I'm just gonna go around some of the edges and just bring up some little pieces that were got by the dry brush, but I just want to give them a bit of a bonus highlight. So I just want to bring up some of the lips, then I'll go around the bottom edge of the shield as well that I didn't quite get with the dry brush, but I do think that it looks quite nice with it. I would always recommend after a dry brush, like unless you're just doing like slap chop tabletop, this is fine. I would always recommend going over with a small detail brush just to reinforce some of the highlighty bits that the dry brush did get, but you just want to reinforce the shapes a little bit more. So I think now it's pretty much all done, the shield at least. So we're just gonna quickly paint the rest of the guy, do some skin, do some dry brush, add the metallic, and then he's pretty much done. So for the skin, I'm going with like a classic orc pale green kind of tone. It's a little bit of a yellow green with the Elysian. So we're just gonna get some of that in my little palette, water it down a little bit so it's not quite so thick. And then we're just gonna slap it on everywhere. One thing I didn't do in this tutorial was do a shade. I think it would work quite well just because of the muscle definition. You could use a shade like Nuln Oil or Agrax over the skin just to dull it down a bit. But because I was focusing on the dry brushing, I decided not to do a shade. But you could do one. I would recommend doing quite a watered down shade over the dry brush, or do a dark kind of thick shade and then a pale dry brush over the top, and then maybe a watered down shade of a different color on top of that, just so you have the super deep shadows and then you have the super bright highlight but kind of dulled down a bit with the extra watered down shade over the top of that. Just making sure I've got all of his skin, don't forget the feet. So now we've got all the skin covered, I'm just gonna go in with the Ogryn Camo. It's a very slightly paler version of Elysian green, and I'm just gonna aim for the skin. I don't really mind too much if it gets on the black, but I'm trying to just keep it on the skin. Just doing the same, getting most of the paint off the brush onto the wood, but still keeping it loose enough and moist enough that I can spread it around without getting those streak lines. And then just for the cloak and the clothes, on the box it is black leather looking material, so I'm gonna use Ushabti Bone. I find if you use white on black, it kind of looks very shiny, whereas if you use a slightly off-white like Ushabti, then it looks slightly better. So I'm just cleaning the brush a bit, and then we're just gonna scrub it. Try and keep all your brush strokes in the same direction, just so then when you are like establishing where the light is coming from, you don't want to be brushing upwards, because then it'll look like it's lit from below because you'll be getting paint in the shaded bits. I do put some on his face just to bring out his lips a little more, but I'm mainly trying to keep it off the skin and only on the clothing. I'm also going to put some on his staff just to wood it up a bit. I would have painted it brown, but I forgot. But I think it looks good like this. I think it kind of matches. But yeah, there he is. Little guy. He's got some really nice texture, so I think it does work really well with the dry brush. And you could easily bash out an army like this, just dry brushing the Gutrippaz and the other orcs. The orcs have really nice texture for this. I do need to base him, but that is later me's problem. Of the things I used, I do tend to use Citadel paint. I was sent a dry brush set by Notts Hobbies. There is a link in the description below for my affiliate code and a discount code for you. You get 10% off if you use frog10, frog with 2 G's. It includes the 3 goat hair brushes that I showed, a brush soap that is actually really nice and it smells amazing. So unnecessary, but it smells really nice. The wood panel for getting your paint at the right consistency and dryness on your brush. I think that's a really good thing. I've never had one before. I don't do a lot of dry brushing, but I really found it really useful. And there is also a dampening sponge, which I didn't use, but if I did do more dry brushing, I probably would. Thank you for watching. Thank you for learning things if you did. If you have anything you want me to do a tutorial of, please leave a comment or come to Twitch or my Instagram and spam me. There's also a Discord in the description as well if you want to join. But yeah, check out my other tutorials and maybe come book club on Wednesday. Bye bye.